Okay, we're here live on the air with another episode of the Kink Tank. After a little bit of Google shenanigans there, so we actually didn't think we were going to do an episode this week, but we are here doing another one, and we're going to stick to the topic that we had created. This episode's topic is private kink versus kink in the community. And we have our world famous and esteemed panel here with us to discuss the ins and outs, the benefits and advantages and disadvantages. So let's talk a little bit about private kink and community kink. This is something that, I should probably let more people do the talking because pretty much my whole involvement in kink has been in the community. It was a very short time between when I discovered this and decided that I liked it and the time that I came out to my first event. And the first event that I went to, I liked and wanted to come to more. So there wasn't a whole lot of time that I was strictly private in my kink. But I do think that, some of the things that I can speak to anyways is the way that my kink looks in private versus the way it looks in public or at community events. So let's talk about sort of the first part of that. Was anybody here involved in kink long before their involvement in the community? Because I happen to know that all of you are involved in our community and local communities around. So
I had about 2 years of experience on my own before I ever discovered that a community existed. And that was kind of off and on as relationships started and ended. Um, and it is interesting. You look up a lot of stuff on your own, try to figure out what you're doing. As far as coming in community, I've only been in for a year. Um, and community does have some benefits. Definitely getting to learn a lot more about a specific interest and being exposed to a lot of things that you wouldn't otherwise.
okay.
I've been into kink for, I guess, a little over 12 years, but only out in the community for a very short time. And I've found it much more beneficial being out as far as learning, as far as safety, learning
Okay.
different safety measures. And then when you're not in the community, you don't have the resources.
Okay. So what were, if I can, before we get around to everybody else, but your reasons for coming into the community late? I mean, let's say late, 12 years into it. Is that because partners of yours were not interested in coming out to community events, or is it because you didn't realize it existed, or was it, some other reason, a discretion issue, or?
Initially, it was I didn't know it existed. And then, two, I was outed as being bi in my profession and actually lost my job because of it.
Okay.
So coming out kink, I was concerned of people seeing me and it affecting my career.
Sure.
And then it was finally hell with them. I mean, this is my life, and I am so glad I made the change.
Right. So you decided to throw caution to the wind and, let the chips fall.
Exactly.
Okay. Shane, Josie?
I've basically been out from the get-go, out in public. So, where my conversation on this part is going to focus is really the manifestation publicly and privately. I have seen a lot of people who have come in from private environments or doing kink more privately, and a lot of what they say tends to echo what Jeannie has said as well, which was, you're amazed to find out what kind of resources are available. I think it's really eye-opening, simply because when you do things online, if you sort of use, Wikipedia as your, kind of like a guide of how the internet sort of works, you kind of go from idea to idea to idea, but it's difficult to see how it looks in the big picture. And then when you're in the community, how people exercise all of these individual things in a broader sense becomes way more obvious. It's that, and also seeing how people integrate their sort of, for lack of a better term, vanilla lives and kinky lives, it becomes much easier for people to understand how to create that balance when they're around other people that do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was around for about a year before I came into community, and I mean, I had stumbled upon kind of the internet community, but I don't really think that counted. I mean, I wasn't super active, I wasn't super visible. That was just kind of a portal to figure out what the hell I was doing, what some of the options were, kind of what was going on. And I will say about, obviously I came into community after that and I didn't leave, so there were certainly positives to that. But what I will say about, a positive an advantage that maybe that gave me, I was 18 when I was kind of snooping around and trying to figure out what I had stumbled upon. And the nice thing about not being in community was I got to control the rate that I was exposed to things. I got to control, I just had a really high level of control over what I was seeing and what I was doing and what I was exposing myself to. And I liked that. I didn't have too many things rushing at me at one time. It was really only what I found, a lot of the time by accident. And also, it wasn't really a discretion issue. I wasn't really ever worried about that. I was careful where I thought I needed to, and other than that, I just kind of managed my own risk. But it was more of a, like, I wanted to have ownership of my experience. I wanted to be able to be the one to jump in instead of have people kind of shove me off the edge. And that is a very hard thing to do when you're in a community, because you walk into one community event and there's 17 things going on and you're there. I mean, you go all the way. That's what you do. But when you're in private, you don't do that. You kind of manage that a little. And I think probably a lot of people like that about kink in private, is that you get to pick those things.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, one that I'd never really heard someone express. Like, I think there's something to that. It seems like there are folks that come into the community, and of course they're not just kind of dipping their toe in. They're all in. They're excited and they want to go to this event and that event and these kinds. And they're exposed to quite a bit, quite a few different things. And sometimes it does feel a little overwhelming. And I don't know if sometimes that makes people leave or not. But that's an interesting approach, that kink in private, meaning not coming out to community events specifically. You could seek out what you wanted. It didn't come and keep slapping you in the face.
Yeah, the pace is really slow. I mean, maybe you stumble upon a person who you want to get involved with, who you start exploring with, but because you're not seeing them in person and you don't have to sit down at dinner and have an entire conversation with them at once, you get to pace yourself that way. And there's good and bad to that. I will own that. I mean, there's certainly bad to that, in that if you're shaping your own experience, you don't get a very diverse experience. If you're online looking for people who are into one specific thing, you're going to find one specific thing. So there's certainly negatives to it, but yeah, I think that's what it is. It's kind of the pace.
Okay. And I mean, it's no secret. Like I said, we're all kind of community-involved people, and I think that we could all even be classified as sort of proponents of community. If somebody asked most of us, hey, I'm kind of into this thing, should I come out to these local events to me? I mean, the answer for everybody here would be yes.
Yes.
Thumbs up.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
That's how you get the Kinky Recruiter Munchie Award.
That's right. You are the recruiter, aren't you?
Something that, like, some people, whenever you do that, though, like, they get so paranoid because they're like, well, what if this isn't what I think it is? Or what if, I see somebody there that I know? So sometimes it's actually, like, nicer to show them what they think they're interested into, like, almost in a private setting, because it gives them, like, they're more relaxed. Because whenever you're at an event, I don't care who you are, you do kind of get the anxiety of the fact that, people are watching you, or you think that they're looking at you like, oh, you're the new kid, whatever.
Yeah, the fresh meat walking in.
So I think sometimes it's important to kind of show them maybe in a private setting. Like, if you invite them over and you're like, I'm going to show you what you're going to see there, stuff like that.
Yeah, and there are some mechanisms in some communities, whether it's like newcomers meetings or dungeon orientations or things like that. But No, it's all good points, but I mean, what I'm saying is we're all a little bit biased here, and I think that
Yeah.
that it's mostly going to be like, yeah, kink in private, it's good, but one thing, I think it's kind of the I hear it from community folks a lot, maybe a little bit too much. They kind of dismiss, kind of like Jeannie, you're saying that you were into kink and doing your kink for 12 years, and then you decided to come into the community. Well, they would pretty much discount those previous 12 years, sort of like, oh, like just kind of doing it on your own. Because I think that there's a perception that it's not real, or that it's misinformed and aimless, or that it's not an immersive experience, I guess. So they guffaw at your 12 years, or just because they simply can't verify it and they think you're full of shit. So I see.
Which is unfair.
It is. I believe that it is, because
Especially in the internet age. If you think that you're more informed just because you've been to a party, a very well-informed kink and private person could probably on technical knowledge.
No, I agree, and I think that there's plenty of good things that can come out of kink in private, before somebody, or maybe they never decide to come out into the community because they can find other people and practice their kink, and read up on the safety and the to keep everybody safe and to keep it all good. I think there are plenty of resources out there, and Shane, you had mentioned Wikipedia, but I think most people probably use other social networking sites for their information as opposed to
right,
Wikipedia.
But what I meant by that was that I meant more a Wikipedia style, where you click on things that interest you, so it's a point-to-point interest, not a full-blown kind of amalgamation. I didn't mean Wikipedia specifically.
Okay.
But you might be on like a BDSM site and then click on a bondage link because you're interested in rope, and then from rope somebody might suggest canes, and you go to like the canes thing. Whereas when you go to a space, you see a bondage scene with canes, and you see it all kind of working together. Mm-hmm. Whereas Wikipedia, that logic is, you go from link to link to link for individual things, kind of like what Josie was saying, which is you take things in kind of as you want, and you click on the things that interest you, whereas your exposure is much more broad in terms of styles of play or integration of styles of play, much more than specific interests.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's that, and then you also, there's different interpretations of different things. Like, there's a million ways to do impact. There's a million ways to do, whatever. So every website that you're clicking on, you're almost like taking that person's interpretation of it. So you're not really getting, and like you said, you're not getting the full spectrum. But, you might be learning something improper and hurting someone as well.
Exactly. That was one of the biggest things with being online is I would specifically, before I played with someone, researched it, and every website described it differently. Very seldom did I find two that would be logical, even.
Mm-hmm. But I think you find that in the community too, though. I mean, we're kind of big on the, for the most part, there's no real right way. This is the way I do it. Other people might do it differently. There are some agreed upon general things, but I think that if you're specifically, you're into a particular kink, like over-the-knee spanking, for instance, you're probably not going to, even if you're not in the community, you're going to search out that information and find a lot, whether it's videos or instructionals or blogs of people who enjoy this kind of thing and the headspace that it puts them in and why they do it. But if you're into it, you're probably going to have a variety of things that you dig up. I mean, the internet is a big place with lots of stuff. And, but I do think that there's something to be said for, seeing it in person. Mm-hmm. Talking in an interactive way to practitioners of a particular kink, as opposed to reading somebody's blog anonymously or watching some kind of video, even if it's a tutorial type video, or watching porn or whatever, wherever you're getting your sort of visual tutorial from. Is that what we? Did I just call porn a visual tutorial? I think I did.
That was sex ed.
Know where you learn your tricks.
Because everybody says if you want to learn how to do sex, you really shouldn't watch porn. It's not a very good video tutorial.
I just told my son that tonight.
Stop watching porn or your eyes will cross.
No, actually, it's not like that in real life.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, to add on to your point, Michael, you know, and taking it back a few years before the days of YouTube and instructional videos, if you read a bondage book or any other kind of instructional, what I take away from it and what you would take away from it would be completely different. It would be our own interpretation, how we want to apply what we've learned. And, you know, we make it our own thing. And I realize I am biased in the community.
yeah,
But
so it's not
getting to
just
see how other people interpreted the same thing is nice.
it's not just the diversity of the material that's out there. It's
It's from person to person reading the same material. You're going to get separate interpretations.
Gotcha.
Well, and another problem I feel like with that is, I'm sure you all have seen the show Sex Send Me to the ER. I feel like those are people that are very uninformed.
No, I've never seen it, and I don't know if I want to, but I've heard about it.
A&E show or something.
I mean, it's like BDSM gone wrong. That's what it is.
Well, and I think it's pretty unfair when people say that you're safer because you're in community, like players are safer because they're in a community versus, you know, you meeting them anywhere else. But I think you have to be fair there and say they're not any safer in community inherently. Like, we don't vet people. Most communities don't. There's no way to vet people. What are you going to do, have them fill out a questionnaire, like yes or no, true or false? There's no way really to do that. So you're not, in that regard, you know, more likely to find a safe person. I think what it is that when you're a community, you're held accountable. There's no accountability when there's no community, and that's the difference. But people are not inherently safer, and they're not inherently more knowledgeable. I don't think that's true at all. I think Jeannie is a very knowledgeable person about a lot of different kinds of toys, and I may have, you know, 5 years on her with involvement in community, but she's got many more of those years with involvement with kink in general, and I'm still going to respect that time. I don't think you can weight the time that way. I think it kind of depends on the person. You can have a person who did bad research, and you can have a bad community member.
I agree with what you're saying. I do agree with what you're saying, that, you know, this idea that community players are safer or, you know, less likely to, you know, hurt you, kill you, stalk you, whatever. I think that's a fallacy. But I do think that there is something to the notion that playing in community spaces is safer than playing with strangers in community spaces is safer than playing with strangers in private places.
Yeah,
Most definitely.
I agree with that.
So that is, I think, something that you sort of get with your involvement in the community. That's something that folks who choose to keep this strictly private, that's a disadvantage that they're at. So there might be extra work that they need to do, you know, extra trust that they need to have for this person, extra vetting or getting to know. Whereas in our public spaces anyways, people are watching, you know, and there's a house safe word, you know, there's no going past that. And so you know that you can come, and it may not be a good experience, but, you know, it's not going to be an unsafe experience. You know, you can whether it's because, you know, DMs are watching, or it's because the people that are playing have a certain, you know, practice with this, or just that, you know, if you say no, that it means no.
Yeah. And maybe that's not because you are more safe sometimes. It's just that you feel that way. And that matters. I mean, your feeling absolutely matters with that. So knowing that those things are in place, if that makes you have a better time, that's absolutely a huge benefit to community.
Right. So let's talk. I just wanted to shift a little bit, because I think we kind of, you know, got to where I was thinking about with this kink in private versus kink in the community, and some of the differences and some of the, you know, personal stories that we had about it. But what about community folks whose relationships and play look different in private than they do in public? Can you think of examples of that? Can you look at yourself and say there are, we were talking about sexualized spaces not that long ago, a few episodes ago, and for a lot of people, that's a difference in the way that they do their kink in public. They play with people in public, but the sexual contact that they like to have in private, they leave that part out. Well, isn't that leaving out a big part of it? Are we not getting the whole picture of their kink? Do we get a whole picture of anybody, really? Can we? Or is it kind of like when you're in community, kind of like what they say about nature photography? You're only going to get real nature photography if your subject doesn't know you're watching him.
Right.
I can tell you that my kink definitely in public is different than my kink in private. But a lot of that has to do with just sort of my style of play. I much prefer, for example, for it to be quiet. Because I like to talk a lot during my play, and I've never been in a dungeon space that didn't have music playing. So I find it very distracting or counterproductive to what it is that I'm trying to do because, obviously I know people have a lot of different styles, but what you often see in dungeon spaces is impact play, and I can do that, no problem. But for the kinds of play that I want to engage in, it requires me to speak a lot more, and I find the music very distracting for that and very kind of invasive in that sense.
So you're saying, Shane, that you talk more in private than you do
during my play.
Just giving you some shit.
Oh yeah.
We all know Shane as a talker, but I guess when the music's playing, you're kind of you're saying in a scene there's a big difference.
And I still do all that stuff that we're used to, checking in and doing all that kind of stuff, but I typically tend to limit my verbal communication a great deal, comparatively speaking.
Yeah. It's hard to talk in a low and sexy tone to somebody when it's...
Exactly. I mean, basically my conversation becomes some flavor of boots and pants and,
Well, and I mean, it is more, like you said, it's more sensual whenever it's in a private scene. I mean, it definitely is. But at the same time, like, you and your partner just might feel more comfortable in that sense too, because let's be honest, a lot of people, they'll sit there and they'll judge what you're doing and they'll be like, oh, they did that wrong, they did this wrong, and they'll correct everything. But whenever it's just like you and your partner doing a scene, it's like you don't have to worry about people telling you to watch out for this, watch out for that, oh, you're doing this wrong,
Well, yeah, I think that goes back to Shane that there are less distractions in a private setting. You can be more intimate. Or you can just do off-the-wall things that would be considered a social faux pas in a dungeon space. For example, just being a little bit messy,
okay,
which could be part of the fun, but is not good etiquette at a dungeon space.
So either things that are against house rules in these community spaces, and there are usually some things that you can do at home that you can't do in a community space. But then to what Sam was saying, that it's a judgment thing as well, that there are this idea that you're being judged or you're being watched is going to affect the decisions that you make and the types of play that you do, for instance.
The other thing that I've noticed for me personally is that one of the functions of public play, I mean specifically play as opposed to going to, I've gone to plenty of parties where I haven't played, but in terms of playing in public, there is a certain exhibitionist quality to it. People like to be seen. I know a lot of bottoms like to be seen. A lot of tops like to be seen. But there are some, for me personally, some activities that are better lent to public, exhibitionism, for example, than others. And like I said, I mean, people who know me know I'm into a lot of, humiliation play and sort of verbal and mental play, which for me is much easier. Or there's a difference between humiliation play and public humiliation play. And so,
right.
You can't engage in humiliation play in public without it becoming public humiliation.
Right. So it's a different, like your private humiliation stuff goes in your, you stuff that in the toy bag because you have to do that at home. Your
Correct.
scene will be different at its core because there's other people around.
Correct. But I mean, it's interesting because sometimes I'll save those sort of more impacty, fun scenes for when we are in public for a variety of reasons. Like one of the great reasons is that when you're in a space, you've got a lot more real estate to play with. You know, say than the average house, right? And I don't have the same kind of furniture here that I have at a dungeon space. So in some cases, I can get better scenes, no matter how personal they are, at a space because I have a little bit more flexibility in terms of resources. You know, space, time. You know, I don't have to worry about the dogs barking and, you know, having to be let out. You know, there's no
doorbell ringing. Yep.
You know, the phone's not ringing. Whatever it is, right? It's interesting because being in public, in a lot of ways, actually gives you a greater sense of privacy than being at home, because you don't have your vanilla, you know, influences to sort of bleed in on that.
Well, let's talk a little bit too about power exchange. We've talked a lot about the difference between play in public and play in private, but do you get a sense that people's relationship dynamics and their, you know, whether it's their protocols or their way of interacting is different in public than it is in private?
I'm going to go past this to Sam because I know when we're playing privately, there's kind of more of a structured obedience, but I feel when we play publicly, it's almost it eggs her on for that extra bit of attention from the crowd to misbehave. To need that extra discipline.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
I think your face says it.
Well, I mean, another thing is, though, with switching, like, I guess a lot of people got confused because, you know, like, Ray ties me and he talks to me a lot. But then I started learning how to be taught as well. And so, you know, some people saw me go out and play and they got really confused and almost like they thought that I had no idea what I was doing. And it's not that. It's just it's when after you pre-negotiate something, you know, and your partner, because if you have a primary partner, I think it's important for them to know and they're okay with it, then you might be kind of afraid to show people that you can do both.
Okay.
I think that I with that, I'm much more comfortable showing my service than my submission in public, and I think that has a lot to do with the vulnerability level that I feel when I'm in public, because I am not an exhibitionist. I am not inspired to be. I'm not really inspired by being around a bunch of people. It makes me really uncomfortable. So I'm much more comfortable doing booths in a public space than in actively displaying my power exchange. But that being said, I mean, it's really important to me in play. It's without it, it's kind of unsatisfying to me a lot of the time. If that's the point, I mean, you know, sometimes that's not part of play, but most of the time for me it is. And that's one of the things that playing in public sometimes is a challenge, because if I want to feel that power exchange with someone discreetly and really intimately with my partner, and I feel like I can't get there either because they're distracted and they can't focus on me, or for whatever reason we just can't like key into each other in that way. You know what I'm talking about, like where, you know, kind of everything else is still and you're just kind of looking at each other and you're really keyed into each other. If you can't achieve that, it kind of wrecks up my experience, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's hard to find a you know, a more public space where you can, you know, find that keyed in connection, because there's just too many distractions.
Yeah, and that too, I mean, if I'm keyed in and I'm feeling great, but I can feel that my partner is edging toward the more exhibitionist side, like they're clearly beating me this hard because they're putting on a bit of a show for everybody who may or may not be watching, that doesn't tend to work that well for me. I don't know. Maybe that could, but I don't know.
Well, Shane had said something, I think it was like towards the beginning of when we started doing these kink tanks a long time ago. We were talking about sort of the act, you know, hey, we're going to a community event, so, you know, the protocol's elevated, the manners are a little better, the yes sir is there, you know, these things that people do, this sort of heightened protocol or heightened thing that goes on between power exchange couples. And I was saying, yeah, it's kind of, inauthentic, or gives me the wrong picture of what their home life must look like. And Shane, you said, not really wrong, but incomplete. It gives you an incomplete picture. So
Sure.
what you see people in public in the community, that is a piece.
Yeah, and I think to get back to that point, one of the things that's interesting is that when and the situation is different obviously with Gypsy and I now that we live together. The bottom line is that our power exchange is based on the notion about sort of authority and decision making, and that doesn't change. What changes sometimes are the bells and whistles. I would liken it to this idea that I don't think it's disingenuous to dress up, for example, like to wear your fetish gear to a fetish party. Just because you don't wear it at home doesn't mean that it's not sort of a part of who you are. You know what I mean? You get dressed up a certain way to go to work, right? I'm not going to say that there are expectations, but there is a flexibility that allows you to exercise some of these things a little bit more freely. Like I said, sometimes being in a public space, a public kinky space, actually gives you more privacy in terms of practicing your kink than the vanilla world does.
Yeah, because you're without those distractions and interruptions of the real world, shall we say.
Well, as people have often said, if you have kids in the house or whatever, sometimes those little protocol things that you don't get to exercise all the time have an outlet.
Yes, and I think that's one of the appeals of these sort of weekend events, these 3-4 day parties that happen in some of the cities around us. When you go to one of those events, you see an elevated sense of protocol, and it's not necessarily role play, like, oh, we're going to go play, so let's be somebody we're not. Let's take off this hat and put on that hat instead. Let's be people who people that we aren't really, but that we'd really like to be. What it is an opportunity, an environment where you can exercise those muscles, that you don't always get to. So you're in an environment that, maybe you have the whole hotel.
Yeah.
But you know that the hotel staff is sort of in on this, and they're not. If you come downstairs wearing a certain thing, or if you're being led around on a leash, or if you're showing certain kinds of submissive behavior, whatever that is, that people go, hey, well, it's a damn party weekend, and this is what we do, and this is the perfect time to do it. And just because so that may not be the way their kink looks in private. And some people, I think, will make that mistake of feeling like, wow, we're kind of lax, look at these people, they're all like, yes sir and no ma'am, and in positions and on their knees and eyes down and all this other stuff, and they're like, well, we're kind of like a little more chill, or maybe we're not as into this as we need to be. But it is an incomplete picture of what their actual relationship looks like. Because
what Gypsy just said was that it's like Halloween for kinky people when you go to those events. It's not really that you're actually wearing a costume on Halloween. It's actually, that's kind of how you would rather dress, but the rest of the world doesn't really let you do that the other 364 days a year.
Yeah, it's like Halloween. Dress like a slut day, as we call it, right?
One of the other appeals of public play that I've noticed is that when people are interested in casual play, it's a great way to be able to engage in that without that concern of, hey, let me go to your house or you come to my house. Like, it's a great way to arrange play with people without having to worry about sort of the same kinds of security or safety issues you run into by setting up those dates in private spaces.
Agreed.
We've talked about that in another context, which is, munches and coffees and stuff are a great place to meet people for the first time. Just like playing with somebody for the first time at a party can often be a little more settling for people.
Mm-hmm.
It lets you kind of test drive people, too. If you want to try playing with someone without going to another level. Plus, you know that there are rules in place, so...
Yeah. And you can also watch them play with someone else.
Yeah.
It's actually really interesting. That's one of Gypsy's things. If some of her social media profiles say, if you want me to play with you, one of the conditions of my saying yes is me having seen you play before. And so public play gives you a chance to do that, to observe how people play in their style. And I know that I've been approached by people who have said, I've seen the way that you do X, Y, or Z, and I would love to try that. So there's a certain familiarity that comes out of being able to see people and what they do.
Yeah, and kind of knowing what you're in for or knowing what to expect.
Yep.
Sure. All right. Anything anyone want to add about private versus community kink?
I think it was said before, and I don't remember which episode. I remember Brian made the comment that we tend to, I guess, a little bit more on that showboating side. I tend to do things that are a little bit more dangerous in community because Dungeon has more real estate than I do at my home, and I know that I have safeties around. It may not generally just be the DM. It may be that I've got a small crowd, and if I try something that's going to be a little bit riskier, I wouldn't try in private where it'd be catastrophic. Or in
you have extra resources.
In a public setting, as soon as it starts going wrong, I've got people who are going to call me out on it, or at the very least be able to lend a hand to get it straightened out.
Well, next year for the Munchies, we're going to do a new award. I've just thought of it. We'll call it the Showboater Award. And Ray wants your vote.
and Michael, can I add one more thing about public play that I think is really important? Sure. One of the things that we've talked about in past episodes is the infamous experience question. And the nice thing about playing in public is that it establishes your experience. Like, people can say, "Oh, I've seen so and so play." We're limited sometimes when people say, "Oh, should I play with Jim?" And you can say, "Well, I've known people who've dated Jim and they haven't had any complaints," versus I've seen Jim play in the dungeon and I've seen him play with X, Y, and Z. Do you know what I mean? It helps you set up your bona fides, if I may.
Yes, and let me add to that. Folks who play in private and folks who have no interest in coming out into community spaces or community events I don't think they deal as much in this currency that we call experience as we do on the community side of things. So a person who is not involved in the community might be more inclined to play with you or trust you or whatever if you have those community bona fides. But for somebody who is folks that are not community involved have to understand that in the community we do sort of run on this currency, and if you have none, there are people in the community that will not take you seriously, that will not, and that's hard to understand, and it's a bit of a shaft, I guess, and I think that's one of where this idea that private kinksters come up with that are like, oh, those community people, they're so snobby, whatever. That's because somebody said, I don't know you, and I'm not going to let you do this to me because I've never seen you play, and I don't know. And they're kind of like, well, why not? I'm good at this. I've been doing this for 10 years. Well, okay, but we in the community, anyways, there is a certain amount of weight that I guess maybe some people feel like it has to have, and saying you've been doing this for 10 years doesn't carry much weight with us. So, understanding that for folks that are not involved in the community, it is sometimes hard to establish trust, I think, with community-involved folks. Not that it can't be done, it just isn't done quickly.
And the flip side of that, though, is that if you do play in public, you always have to keep in mind that if you do have something that goes wrong in your scene, that gets added to your sort of experience thing that people may talk about. And I'm not saying, I've heard about people being, say, critical of a rope scene ongoing or some kind of scene, oh, I wouldn't do it that way, I wouldn't do it whatever way. But the flip side of that is, oh, I've seen, Shane play 5 times at a dungeon and 4 times his bottom, used their safe word within 5 minutes, and I don't know if that's, you know what I mean? Like, you carry the good with the bad when you're talking about playing in public.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody. I think we will shut that one down here. And then we'll go on to another topic, which we've been kind of kicking around for quite some time. We called it building support structures. And this is something that we do in the community, we do in our relationships, we do in our families, and so forth. And there are different facets to this conversation, I think. But I wanted to sort of put Josie on the spot because I think that you can maybe articulate what do we mean by a support structure? What's important about support structures? Why do people build them and have them, and so on? Can you help me with that?
Yeah, because I am so huge on support structures. They're the single best thing I think I ever did for myself in the Kink community. I mean, people have them in their normal life too, but in the Kink community, they're just completely invaluable. I think that a support structure for me and for a lot of people that I know that have them, it gives you this really, really wonderful kind of neutral zone. When you have somebody who's, you can have different kinds of support structures. You can have partners who are your supports. You can have, acquaintances, special interest groups. But I think it's really, really nice to have that kind of neutral zone of people where you're not in a relationship with someone, so you don't have to weigh your answer against your partner's reaction. There's no chance of you having a relationship with them, or you don't have a quote unquote normal, partnered up relationship with them. You can talk to them. You can bounce ideas off them. You can rant at them. You can, ask them questions and try to get an answer, which you can get from people that you're, from a partner, but you're not gonna get a necessarily objective answer from that kind of a person. So there are people that you can rely on to give you, truthful, honest answers. There are people that can give you advice. There are people that can point you in the right direction when you're kind of spinning off of your head, which can happen when you're, plunging down a rabbit hole of this size and diversity. But to me, that's kind of what one is.
So when you're talking about support structures, you're talking about non-partners specifically. Do you believe that partners cannot be support structures, or they shouldn't be part of your support structure?
I think that partners are absolutely important to have as a part of a support structure, but I think they are insufficient alone. Because a lot of people, I mean, let's be real, a lot of people will not speak to their partners about a lot of stuff, and it's not about being secretive, and it's not about lying. It's just about a sense of privacy and a sense of neutrality, and you don't want the person, in the end of the day, to take it personal. Because maybe what you want to talk about is, something that you want to broach, or something that happened, and your partner just can't. They can love you to the moon and back, but they can't be objective in a situation like that. And your friend arguably might not be able to either, but I think you have a better chance of that. I think, having a partner who's a support for you is like one kind of support system, completely different from having a friend or a trusted person who's your support structure, to me. So it's insufficient alone, but I think it's a really, really important component of your support system.
Okay. And are you talking, because it sounds to me like you're either, in layman's terms, I guess we can talk about people that you can vent to. Those are nice people to have in your support structure. Yeah.
Yes.
People who understand you or will listen without judgment.
Yep.
People that you can gossip with.
Sure. Sure. People who are creative.
People who are creative or feed you in other ways.
People who are technically sound. In Kink, those are really important. What?
People who just feed me.
Also important.
That's part of it, yeah, because that's a very important part of the support structure. When we're talking about people that you can vent to, or people that I don't know, cheerleaders, is that the right word?
Yep, I think that's fair.
Sure. Yeah, those are very important.
Yep.
Okay. Everybody should have a personal cheerleader.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it's awesome when you can find one person who can check a bunch of these boxes. Mm-hmm. Because what you end up finding, at least in my experience with that, is just this really awesome sort of intimacy. It's not sexual. I find that when you start fucking your support system, it becomes fragile. it's not. It doesn't usually. It changes the whole nature of your relationship with that person in a way that is not conducive to, progress. You go the other direction when you do that. But if you have a person that you can cut up with, that can be your, cheerleader, that can give you creative ideas for problem solving when you've been venting and bitching about whoever it is that you're, bitching about, it's just this really incredible intimacy that I have found a tremendous amount of value in.
Yeah. Or just, pet your hair and tell you that you're right, even when you're not necessarily right.
Yeah, pet my hair and tell me that I'm pretty is also important too. And if we're not fucking, then you absolutely mean it all the time, which is also nice.
Because then you know the motivation's genuine, right?
Pure, yeah.
Excellent. So what kind of things do we find in the community? Like I think probably the most obvious is people of similar power orientation. So groups that are specifically for dominance, groups that are specifically for switches or submissives or littles or something like that. Those are good places to find support, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't mean support group like we're talking about a recovery
Therapy.
group. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
We just mean people that are, of common thread,
Kindred spirits.
Kindred spirits. Good way to say it. So where else do we find these? I mean, I also see a lot of family making in this community, and we talked about cliques and things like that in previous episodes. But I'm talking about people who identify as brothers and sisters and sort of clan. I mean, that's a sort of support network, isn't it?
And it's interesting because it depends on how broad you want to go, but the word that gets tossed around a lot is tribe.
Okay.
People, I mean, there's the broader sense where people who are just, kind of physically there in your space are part of your tribe versus people that you choose to associate with regularly are really more your tribe in that sense,
Okay. And mentors, I guess, when people have them, I suppose you would include them in your support network. But why is it important? Like, why do we need these things?
Well, I would say that
why can't we just have the people that we're in relationship? Why can't we just have, romantic relationships and leave everything else out? Shouldn't we be able to be, sort of fed and inspired and loved all in one place?
The first thing that I would say for myself personally is, sanity/reality check. It's very, very difficult to be logical about situations that you're emotionally invested in. You see this all the time where people, are kind of blind to things that are going on in their relationship until people point them out to you. And I have found that sometimes good support structure means people telling you things that you don't always want to hear. It often means telling people things they aren't going to listen to. But I have found that the best support people I have are the ones that say, when it's required, not all the time obviously, but when it's required, you're being an idiot.
Yeah. It's that whole girl,
Yeah.
Well, that has as much value as being told you're pretty all the time. It's genuine.
Well,
Sometimes,
if that's their job, then I think it's okay. But then you need somebody else to tell you the truth all the time.
Well, yeah, you need the diversity, because if you always get one point of view, it's the point of view that you always want to hear. That's not support. That's the blind leading the blind.
it's called enabling.
And they're called sycophants.
Right.
I saw this. It was on The Fifth Element. Anybody remember that movie? It was long time ago. And there's this awesome character, Ruby Rod, who is just this diva, performing, dancing, flashy, show person. And he's got this posse of sycophants. Where when he's done with the show, he's like, so how was that? How was that? And they're like, oh, it was it was so,
It was super green.
Super green, right? And was it green? Oh, it was so green. It was the greenest, and that's not really a service to that person if all you're going to do is, jerk them off when they're asking you questions like that. But I guess some people don't necessarily want the truth. But do we, there are people And I think that people who do this are probably in a position where they can't see that they do this, and that is surround themselves with people who agree with them.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's the bad support.
I think,
I'm
yeah,
surrounding myself with people who eventually agree with me.
There are two types of people: people that agree with Shane and people that will agree with Shane.
People that are
don't
wrong.
know that they agree with me yet.
No, I think with that, I mean, what we're talking about too, about this issue of, why can't you just have people in a relationship with you? Because we don't live in shiny fairy unicorn castles where we tell everybody everything. Even those people that say, well, I talk to my partner about everything. We have honest, open conversations every day about everything that we feel. I call bullshit on that every time. And I think that in a healthy, functioning relationship, it is perfectly natural for people to have certain thoughts or feelings that are private, to withhold some things from their partner, either because they're working on them in their mind, they're not fully formed, and they need a little more space to do them, or because they're too emotional to put at that person at that time. And for whatever reason, I think it's healthy and natural to have some of those things, and those are the things that you want to have a sounding board for, because they're not usually little things. If they were little and insignificant, you would have already said them to your partner, or you would have acted on them in a community, or whatever it is that you're chewing on. You have to have someone who's neutral but in your corner. And I don't know. I think because of that, it's good to have supports that are similar to you. If you're a little, to have someone who's a little, because you have relatable ground. If you have a certain kink that someone else is also into, because it gives them a lot of perspective on you. If they know that you're super, super into this kind of kink, and then they're hearing about your relationship troubles, they have a lot of insight into what might be going on below what you're saying to them about a certain problem. That's absolutely important. A stranger can't be your support system. Okay. I feel pretty strongly about that too, but I also know that one of my best supports that I have is a person who's a different gender identity than me, and a person who's a different power orientation than me. But I think the reason why that person is such a good support for me is because they're my opposite. And there's a lot of honesty that can kind of develop there.
Okay. So a diversity in your support structure. So you need one cheerleader, one to make you food, one that you can vent to, one that will tell you you're pretty and pet your hair. So that's a lot of people. How big does a support network need to be? And like you said, it's great when you can find a lot of those things in one person.
Yeah.
But is this a basic human need that we're talking about? Like, this isn't just kinky people. This is everybody. But I think it also comes into special focus when we're talking about people who engage in power exchange and people who do, let's say, relationships in a different way, because you can't just write Dear Abby to say, I'm having this problem where my daddy doesn't seem to want to, tuck me in bed at night. They'd be like, well, what the fuck are you talking about? That people don't understand. It's important to have support structure for people who do understand. And we talked a little bit in previous episodes about therapists and professionals and things like that, at least to be, aware of these things. I mean, are they considered support structure as well?
One problem I see with therapists is because, whenever I first started getting into it, I know myself and a couple other people that we'd go talk, because we had to go to therapy or whatever, and we would kind of, casually bring it up because of the fact that that's, part of our lives, because they would ask about it. And a lot of therapists that I mean, between me and the people I've talked to that have gone to them, they almost look at it like it's a story, like it's story time. And so you kind of feel judged whenever you talk to them. I mean, I'm sure there's some out there that, would maybe read up on it so they understood a little bit better and things like that. But just the ones that I've genuinely, had a conversation with about it because, for therapeutic reasons, it's just I feel like they're looking at me like a little kid looks at you whenever you tell a story. Like they're just excited and all this
living
stuff.
vicariously through you.
But I guess
it's not. It's more than that though. It's not that they're living vicariously. It's somebody tells you this crazy rumor, and then all of a sudden you're gonna run off and you're gonna tell your best friend, "Hey, guess what I heard?"
But here's a distinction that I like to make. I think therapists and all those kinds of things are good, but that seems like to me one of those, oh, I'm feeling something, let me schedule an appointment to talk about it next week, and my support structure really ends up being the kind of people I can call at 3 in the morning.
So can you call a professional that you're paying or who
Right.
has a professional interest in you part of your support structure? I
Well,
don't know.
it's interesting because when we talk about support, I might get better advice from a therapist, but the reality of it is what I really might need is just a friendly voice at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, and I want to, I work in the mental health profession, and I have to give credit where it's due. If I were not a kinky person, I would know fuck all what to say to someone who came into my office and started talking about this stuff, because when you're new to it or you've never been exposed to it, we all have to admit this is a very deep rabbit hole. It is very complex. The layers of these relationships are really, really difficult to wrap your brain around in a 30-minute session, or however many you have had. The proficiency you have in navigating it, I think, is directly related to your experience with it. So if you don't have the experience, you're actually a really bad ally. I mean, all you can do is kind of say, does that make sense? Well, yeah, it does. You're thinking about this logically, but it doesn't mean you're necessarily giving good advice just because they're a trained professional, because it's just so different. And the social framework for kink, it's not you don't see it in 18 romantic comedies a day. There's no framework for how to navigate it to someone who's not involved.
And for some people with their support structures, what's important to them or what I think feels best for them is a bit of empathy. And when this person has nothing to stand on in that regard, it's kind of hard to. And it's just a feeling of, yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Right.
And they go, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Instead of I know what you're talking about because I've been listening and writing notes. I've kind of been there myself, or I felt that way before. And I think it's just a really good way for people not to feel alone, because isn't that, and not just in a kink sense, but can people really survive? I guess. The vanilla public at large has to have some kind of support structure, right? It's their sister-in-law, it's their mother, it's their coworker, it's
I'd say other vanilla sources of support, aside from family and professional help. There's that guy that goes to the bar every Friday night just to bitch. He might not know anybody at the bar. He might be a regular, know all the other regulars. But just to have that ability to go out and talk to some people and have them agree is enough support to get them through the rest of the week.
Yep, that drunk at the bar.
Well, and some people show up at parties for the same thing. They go to enough parties, they don't talk to a lot of people, and then suddenly they run into you for the 5th time, and they're like, hey, can I talk to you real quick? Can we have a conversation? And, I think that probably comes from a lack of a support system, but in that moment, you're building a support, and I think that's pretty healthy. That's a good idea. It's kind of a weird run-in to have, but if you did that at the bar, your experience would probably be bad. If you do it at a party where someone has common ground with you, better.
And when we had agreed on this topic, or sort of kicked this topic around, it kind of came into my mind about people who, I don't know if they did a poor job of building support structure, but let's say they're interested in kink, they've been doing kink, and they've been partnered up, and they're community involved. I think where this support structure idea really comes into play is when something goes wrong in one of those relationships.
Yeah.
That, what I see sometimes is one of them will stick around, the other one will go away. And whether that's go away to another community because they don't want to, see that other person, or it's just that they feel like everybody's chosen sides and chosen against them.
Or, to be fair, the other one I've seen are the people that don't have a big support structure go away until they have a new partner.
Well, yeah, then they have somebody that they can...
No, but that, you chuckle, but that's a thing. I don't know how many times I've seen people that show up and everything is wonderful, and then you don't see them for a couple of months or a couple of years even, and then they show up with somebody new, and the best ones are the ones that act like they've never been gone. Like the community hasn't shifted around them at all.
but to me, it seemed, or it felt to me like when I see that happen, that's because for a different reason. It's not because they left because they didn't feel like they had support. Obviously, they didn't have enough friends to sort of keep them engaged in the community. But it's not necessarily like a big drama thing and everybody chose sides and they were the got the shit end of the stick or something, and so they had to wait until they could find somebody to hide behind to come back into the community. Maybe that happens, but for some people, kink is something that they do when they have a partner, but they're not. They don't do when they don't have a partner. So, like, what's the point in being in the community if you just come in alone all the time? And I would say there's a lot of point to it, okay? But some people who do their kink differently or think differently about it than I do may not think so. But I hate to see it, and I've even every now and then I'll do it myself or I'll ask somebody else to do it. Hey, how about throwing this person a lifeline? Like, heard it was a messy breakup, heard it was ugly, hope you'll still be coming around. Do you want to come out to this with us? And just kind of keep them engaged, because I hate to see people who want to be in the community not feel like they're able to stay.
Well, I think it's kind of like, I mean, you have a breakup and it's kind of like friends choose sides. You get to go to this place, I'm not going there because you're there. And it's not necessarily that they're not still part of the community. It's just like, well, we used to go there together, I'm not going to go there because everybody's going to ask me how they are or something like that. And I mean, that sounds really ignorant the way that I said it, but it does happen.
Absolutely. Or it's not even as bad as all that. It's too painful for me to be in the same room with this person right now, so I'm going to stay away for a while. But I'm talking about people that we never see again.
Yeah.
And I hate to see that happen, because I think that community is a place where everybody who has an interest in kink, who's 18 and older, should be able to come. Whether
one of the things, sorry, I was going to say one of the things about that I wanted to touch on that I think is really important is that support doesn't exist in a vacuum, and I have found that the people who contribute to other people, the people that you see supporting other people, are the ones that are generally able to form a better support structure. And those people that you're talking about, just in my experience, I can't say, I can't quantify it, but people who have had bad experiences or bad breakups or whatever who tend to leave are also the kinds of people that I've seen not be engaged with other people. Like, they haven't done the work themselves to support other people, and generally speaking, it leaves them with not a lot of people who have a concern or an investment in their experience in the community.
Sure,
so they don't have anybody to draw on.
Yeah,
right?
they didn't build their own support structure while they were there.
It's not a bank account that you can just make withdrawals out of. You have to be making deposits into it. And the other thing I see is a lot of people who burn bridges. The problem with building a support structure is it doesn't take much to do something to alienate people who were once your best friends, and then they never want to talk to you again, and then you've got not just the person you broke up with, but perhaps a bunch of people that didn't have a side to pick. You've given them a side to pick by the way that you behave going out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's a really good point. It does pay it forward to be other people's support systems, because they tend to become yours later on. And sometimes you don't even realize that kind of taking place until you're in a situation where your partner isn't present, and you say, well, I can't come out this weekend, I had a breakup, my partner's not here. And they're the kind of people that kind of smack you in the face and say, what are you doing? Like, you exist independent from your partner. We care about you, not just because it's you and this other person. And when you least expect it, that kind of currency is just so valuable.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that too, because this is kind of what I'm getting at. This is, what Josie was saying before was, people that you're romantically involved with, or people who are your partners, or that you're sort of pair bonded with. That is something, but that is not and cannot be your only support structure. So
asking your ex to support you during a breakup is challenging, I will admit.
Right. To be your vent for all the shitty things that you feel about them, yeah, that's rough. But I do see that, and it's probably, these people that I'm talking about that, something goes awry or the relationship hits an iceberg or something, that they didn't build the support structure and they didn't exist outside of their partner, and they didn't come to things that their partner didn't come to. And I think that's actually, like, if I had to give advice about all this, about building support structures, it would be specifically to come to things without your partner.
I so agree.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily not having a partner. I think it's like sometimes we don't go to events together, but like when I like to go to events with somebody else, which is how you're talking about, your partner's gone or whatever. But I think you should almost have like, those friends that you don't have to ask them to go to an event. They're just ready to go. Like for me, it's my mom. Like if I want to go to an event and he's busy or something, I'm like, hey mom, do you want to go up to this with me? And she's like, you all know my mom. She's like, heck yeah, let's go. But
Sure. But
I think it's
somebody
important to have those connections, because without it, you're not going to get back in the community.
But for someone like you who hasn't built any support, who doesn't have people to come out to things with them when their partner is not around, I think it should be a priority, to come out and do things on their own, independent of their partner. Those people that we make jokes of, like, Brangelina. They've been said so many times in the same sentence, and they've been seen so many times together that they become one person. You know those couples that never go anywhere independently of each other. And I think that's like the pothole that people step into in all this, that if you can come to events, with other people or by yourself until you find other support people that you can attend with and, find fellowship with. If you haven't done that and you're relying on your partner to be your support structure in your journey in the community, you're probably going to end up like one of those people who's left out in the cold when the shit goes wrong.
Yeah, they fail. They never come back. And the reason, when you ask them, 9 times out of 10, is because, well, I came to those events with, my person, and now my person's gone, and you find that you have no place. And that's not usually true when you ask other people, but in their mind, they never had an identity that was independent. And I've just always seen that fail. I've maybe seen one person who came back and said, oh, whole new world. I can, go to events, and I can find other partners, and I can do all these things without my person. But most of the time, it's messy. It's ugly.
Well, I think we're also kind of forgetting the group of person that doesn't come back. It's the partner that kind of came to community events because they were interested in their partner, and their partner was introducing them to Kink. And outside of that partner, they probably don't want to try it again.
Without their person, there's no reason for them to be there because they just weren't that into it. Is that?
Yeah. That does happen. I hate to see that person leave, but maybe they just didn't come out to parties on their own because they had no real interest or didn't see anything that interested them while they're there because they were too busy with their partner in that one thing they do, or a series of things.
Sure, and that happens too. I'm just hoping that I think it's as far as like your involvement in the community, if that is a place that you choose to be, that you feel like you belong and like you're invested in, not just because your partner wants to go and you're like, okay, I got nothing better to do, that you make the most of your involvement in the community and find those people to support you. And I don't mean take your side when you break up. There don't have to be sides when we're talking about this, but that you have your own identity within the community, that people just don't see you as an attachment to the other person, or without that other person that you feel like you don't belong.
Yeah, and you don't want your world to get that small either, because a support person doesn't just listen when you're venting because your boyfriend did something that pissed you off. A support person also is just this fountain of ideas and information as well. So maybe your support person is a really great person for helping you diversify your experience, and that doesn't necessarily mean you play with them. It may just be that you're sitting there and you're bitching because you're bad at service and you just can't figure this shit out and it's pissing you off, and maybe your support person is the one who goes, well, what have you tried this? And then you're like, oh, no, I haven't. And it just keeps your world bigger. And I think in kink, the bigger it is, the better your experience is. And, why I just can't imagine what my experience would be without that influence.
Yeah. And let's not forget, we in this community have sort of a battle with vanilla perceptions that the kink that we do is some type of abuse. And so you see all those things that, these little flow charts and, infographics that people have put out about kink versus abuse. And what is the difference between kink and abuse? Well, one of the traits of abuse is isolating the other person from their support network.
Yeah. And
in the vanilla world, that means friends, family, co-workers, whatever. That if I'm engaging in an abusive relationship, if I'm the abuser, I'm doing whatever I can to make sure that you don't have a support network, that I am your only support. And so I think coming from that perspective, I think that if you are interested in building a support structure and your person seems to not want that for you, that there may be a red flag there. Am I wrong?
A great point.
Especially in this community, I think, because, yes, it could be that somebody, it's probably easier for somebody to disguise their abuse under the guise or the cloak of kink. But I think that one's pretty telltale, because when you have a support network, then you're not relying so much on that person, and they don't have the ability to control you. So I think I think that's one of the reasons why I find it important that people do this, and that their partners understand and encourage the building of that support network. What are you laughing about, Shane? You guys watching cat videos or?
Something like that. No, Gypsy had a thing she wanted to add when we were done with the relationship stuff, so we were just waiting to, not interrupt with that.
Okay. When we're done.
I think one of the things that we're majorly forgetting about support groups, that a lot of people don't have communities that either support their particular interests or don't have communities around them. But especially in like the puppy community and things like that, there's a lot of Facebook groups and things like that where people can come and ask questions and have people where they advertise events that are maybe within a driving distance and things like that. There's different events. There's different like puppy groups and stuff like that. So like there's a claw puppy group and stuff like that. So there's those support networks that maybe people that are ostracized from their family or, newly moved into a college town and don't know kind of what's going on and, where people are and stuff like that. It's a way for them to kind of have these long-distance connections with people that still provide them, ability to say, hey, are there other female puppies out there? I've never seen one. And then here comes a parade of 15 of us, in the group going, hey, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, So those I think, and also FetLife groups as well, for some people are also very connecting, that maybe, there aren't people that are into lactation around them, and they were able to connect with other people that are into lactation or other people that are into anything else in the fetish world, and it allows them to at least ask questions, figure out safe ways of doing their particular kink, or, best practices, how to, actually do like fear play scenes or whatever the case may be for their particular interest.
Yeah, I don't think we should discount online communities as good supports. If it's your only support, I would say that might be a house of cards you're standing on. But it can be a component that's very useful.
I think it is. Like I said, the one thing about a lot of these groups that I was saying earlier is, a lot of times you see people who reach out to these groups when they're in, I don't want to say crisis because that sounds, but when they're having a particularly hard time. And there's always somebody there. Like when you're talking about a discussion group, for example, you can post something at 4 in the morning, and there's enough people there that you'll get a response before 4:15 in the morning. You know what I mean? There's this ability, and as I said earlier, the online communities that exist do give you that. Sometimes you just want to hear a friendly voice because you're having a hard time.
Yeah, but it's not always friendly on the internet. Go kill yourself.
You can choose the friendly ones.
generally in these groups they are. You know, I mean,
Right.
yeah, you're always going to face trolls, but I mean, if you are in a, a poly discussion group online and you say, oh, I had this problem, again, something you can't necessarily talk to your partner about, it's not uncommon to have somebody there to say, oh, well, it'll be okay, just do this, this, and this, and you should be all right.
Yeah, I agree.
And Gypsy brought her own troll.
No
So-
trolling.
So in lieu of a real life friendly, friendship, relationship, support thing, you can always get your fix on the internet if you just need somebody to metaphorically pat you on the head.
Sometimes, yeah. But sometimes it is. I mean, we're looking at support in terms of, one of the problems that we've had in terms of the discussion is support for when things, maybe go wrong or when we need support. But support is also, as she said, and I'm sure Ray's dealt with this, I have a rope question. What is, I'm trying to figure out the best way to build a hard point in my home. There are people who have, say, common interests that become a support network for your particular kink, or, they become sort of the hive mind. That's a support structure.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying, at least, as we've gotten into this discussion, and me sort of having seen support networks or the term support network as being a reactive thing. I have a problem, you'll help me. I'm feeling bad about myself, you'll lift me up. Support networks aren't strictly reactive, where
No.
I have a question about rope, you know something about rope, or my poly shit is going wrong, help me. It is actively, propelling you, like, building you, making you feel good, giving you encouragement and confidence and all those things when shit's going right.
Yeah, you're sharing, and you're being really visible, too. I have a huge network of supports with an online writing community, and none of us have ever met. I doubt any of us will ever meet. But just that action of kind of just telling them, and they see the good parts as well as the bad parts, but they're particularly supportive of the good parts, and it is kind of cool to be visible to people in that way. It makes I think it makes you a better person. I think it's just a good exercise to have, but especially in kink, especially if you're trying to kind of get an idea of who you
Well,
are
I
and
mean,
what the
interesting.
hell it
Let me-
is that you're doing.
I'd like to give a practical example that deals exactly with what Josie was just saying. How many people have, say, posted a picture or writing or whatever, and you all of a sudden get 20 likes or 30 likes or 40 likes? Nobody sits around going, well, what's that? Or comments and goes, well, this doesn't count because I don't know those people, right? There's a certain lift, or in some cases, if you do writing or you put a picture up where you get like legitimate critique, like, oh, I would have done it differently. Again, I'm trying to skip over the troll part of this, but there are some people, that's just an excellent resource that is a support network, and as Josie was pointing out, sometimes those things develop where you get people who regularly visit your stuff, and you may never meet these people, you may never know really who they are, what their jobs are, what their kinks are, but because of a common interest and a shared, again, the kindred spirit, we're all writers, or we're all rope people, or we're all, littles. It's a great way to have people, have some input that you can sort of start to filter out the value of that for yourself.
Yeah, but it's that positive thing too. It's not that you're posting because you have a problem that needs to be solved. You're posting,
Okay.
look what I did this week, and your friends who you know in real life go, God, you look hot, or damn, that's awesome, or they just love the pic, or love the writing, or something like that. And that's part of the sort of proactive support network that I'm talking about. They sort of push you along, not just drag you when you grind to a halt.
And one thing I wanted to add, go back to the relationship piece a bit, simply because we had talked about, how your partner, your romantic partner, should not exclusively be your support network. Obviously, I agree with that. But one of the things that I think that people, I don't think anybody's mentioned, is when you're in a poly group, and again, it really depends on how you do your poly, but one of the things that I have found is that my poly group becomes supportive of each other in really cool and interesting ways. So it might be that, my particular case, one of my partners knows that they can go to another one of my partners and have a conversation because they've had similar experiences, or they might have had similar experiences. I also know that because we're all kind of pulling our oars the same direction as a group, there's a great way where if I can't go to an event, for example, with one of them, the other one can go, and you're not going alone, but you're going with somebody who has a lot of the same shared values, that you're comfortable sharing space with, sharing a room with. And I realize that some people keep their poly relationships separate, and that's fine. And my poly relationships are, in a sense, separate, but the social parts of my poly relationships are not separate. And so we have a really great support structure, and that extends out beyond even my relationships, where I can draw on resources from Gypsy's relationships, or vice versa, where we're always there to do things for the other ones. And it's great because that actually transcends into our vanilla life. I need somebody to watch the dogs while we're away for a weekend, and you have this resource of people who understand why you're doing these things and are interested in seeing you succeed in the same way. Again, it's a two-way street. I've done things for other people that have sort of bought me some good karma, but that's all within the context of people who have connected relationships romantically.
Well, and that's part of, we talk about support structures. A lot of people call them support networks, and I guess that's where the network part of this comes in. That it's not necessarily a series of individual support relationships, but a whole structure or a whole network of them that can sometimes actually, work together.
And we've talked about that. I mean, if you come into a relationship with one of the people in our group, you are really coming into a pre-existing support structure, and we've seen it where new relationships have come in, and people were really amazed at how willing we were to support them, in whatever cases it might be, and in some cases in very practical ways. I have a flat tire, my car died, and it might be somebody that you're not directly involved with, but a partner of a partner who happened to be around to show up to give you a lift, or to, people are kind of surprised that when they walk into that, that's kind of what they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the mafia. You're kind of marrying into the family.
Yeah.
It's really not that far off, right? Because it's almost the same process where if you are in a relationship with somebody in there, that essentially counts as vetting. We trust our judgment as it relates to other relationships. So if one of our partners is going to get involved with somebody, it's a safe bet that they're probably pretty decent people.
Right.
And until they blow it, that's kind of the treatment that they get.
Okay. Well, I think we can kind of boil it down to support structures. Get one. How about that?
Yeah. But work towards getting one. You can't just recruit them. There's no find your support job core.
Yeah, give some and maybe get some back. But
and actually, Gypsy just raised a really good point in that the one thing about Kink that we have is that a lot of our relationships, even in our support structures, are very formalized. As you said, with poly families, we might know people who are a member of the same club that we don't actually know very well, but we might support because they're a member of our club.
Right.
Or you might have, a sort of proscribed mentor who takes on a greater deal of responsibility in terms of your support. There are these more formalized relationships versus, I need some help, and then this shadowy network of people goes off, and all of a sudden somebody's emailing you. I know a friend of mine one time was moving and sent out 6 texts to people that he knew to get help for moving, and on the day that he moved, 17 people showed up. How does that happen? I mean, you never get as many people to help you move as you ask. That's why you ask so many people, because
he had more people than he had boxes. Was that?
Kinda.
No, that's obviously somebody who spent a great deal of time, not even consciously, but a great deal of time, paying it forward and building support structure, because I've helped so many goddamn people move that when I need to move, I better have 17 people showing up. I've paid that shit forward for years. No, but that's a really good example. Sometimes, when and the community will sometimes come together for these things. So and so needs hearing aids. So and so needs who their house burned down. These particular people are in need, and that happens, and it's a great community thing that takes place. But as far as like personal support structures, I think that they're definitely worth investing in.
Yeah, and I think that again, I've said it, but I want to reiterate it. You're not going to get anything for nothing.
Agreed.
You've really got to make the effort. And the one thing that I will say is, and this is just my experience, take it for what it's worth, it has to be genuine. If you do things looking to get something coming out the back end, it generally doesn't work out that way. You have to support people because it's the right thing to do, or people are going to see through you and see what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and it comes with its own rewards. Not even
I think so.
the pay it forward thing. But I think we have pretty much sewn this one up. We'll put another one in the history books for the Kink Tank. Thank you, esteemed panel, for participating in the discussion. We're going to do one 2 weeks from now, and then 2 weeks after that, we're going to have a very special New Year's Eve episode that
I'm excited.
Yep, our viewership is not going to want to miss, so mark it on your calendars. I think, I don't know. We'll have to decide whether we're going to broadcast live the day before, because it's a New Year's Eve thing, and we're not going to be sitting on our webcams at 10:30 right before New Year's Eve, unless we have noisemakers and party hats and confetti.
Now, just remember
and a
though,
big bottle of champagne.
Just remember though, Michael, when we do that, make sure we have a lot of solo cups because we can't endorse any particular booze. So let's just make sure we've got some good.
That's right.
Solo cup action.
Yeah, we don't want to give Jim Beam any free advertising on YouTube.
I was
So
going to say brown paper bag works too.
there you go.
Super classy.
Yes, super classy.
I'm drinking a 40. I'm bringing a 40.
I was thinking body shots. That's how classy is that. All right, guys. Thank you, and we'll stop the broadcast here. So
Bye, all
see
the
you in a
people.
couple of weeks, all the viewers. Bye.